Kirby, Brad, Eric, and Matt, thank you so much. I love that. And when Kirby and I talked about that song, Free Like a Broken Heart, isn't that just like, wait, what? Because we think of broken hearts as devastating. And it could be the height of disruption, right? To have your heart broken. And yet, think of what happens when we allow ourselves to be broken open. When we allow ourselves to be broken open, we are free of the status quo. We are free of trying to hold everything together. We are free of trying to continually make it better. And what if there's more to life than just incrementally improving or feeling like what we always have to do is improve ourselves? What if there's something more to life than maintaining the status quo, than having everything be safe and secure and okay? What if there's actually freedom on the other side of letting things fall apart, of letting things be disrupted, right? As you know, our theme for this year is Sacred Disruption, Reimagine Everything. And today I want to talk about the idea that reimagine is really a radical act. It's not improving. It's not trying to improve something. It's actually trying to imagine it entirely different, or in some way broken open from the box of comfort, convenience, certainty, and the status quo. Imagine going forward as opposed to back, right? When we're brokenhearted, we wish it would go back to the way it was. We wish it would go back to the way it used to be. And yet, imagining means to go forward to something. And I don't know about you, but the truth is, I'm best at imagining the worst possible outcome, right? We call it catastrophizing. But I'm really good at, I can go down that road so fast and spin out, well, if this happens, then that'll happen, and then it's going to get worse, and then that's going to happen, and then I'm going to be homeless, and then I'm going to die, right? If we follow it all the way through, that's usually where it ends up. And we are so good at imagining catastrophe. Actually, the root of so much of our anxiety and depression is this almost automatic response to imagine the worst that could possibly happen. And yet, who's to say? Why would we always assume that in being broken open, it's the worst thing that can possibly happen? What if that's actually the doorway into something new? We've been talking now about sacred disruption over the last couple of weeks and really engaging in the possibility that on the other side of that disruption is really something quite amazing, and that we might actually even invite disruption from this deeply sacred point of view, and that it breaks something open and moves us into something that maybe we didn't imagine was possible before. So I want to tell you a little bit of a story about CSLDallas and the campus that we have here. If you haven't been on our campus, it's lovely. We're in a sort of office warehouse space, a big giant complex, and we moved in here in 2004. So where we were before was a little strip mall. When I got here, we had 500 square feet. And we kept adding little spaces. We added a space across the hall, and then we opened up the space we had to take on the space next door. And we kept kind of improving what we had. And we kept until we basically had taken over half of that little strip mall. And we realized that there was nowhere else to go, and it kept feeling like all we were doing was a little tweak here, a little tweak there, and it felt like we had boxed ourselves in. So we began to look for another space. And when we found this location, it took us about a year, we found this location. There were many things about it that I fell in love with. One was the tree outside. But what was so interesting is that this space had been vacant for 5 years. It had been a church before, and they had had a whole lot of area. Some of it had been broken off already. And when we walked into these doors to come into this room, I and my committee, we walked around, and they were like, oh my God, this is terrible. It had basically turned into 5 years of storage. The part of the space was the old nursery, so it was all covered in clouds and, baby elephants, and then there were little cages in which the kids were kept, stacked up on one wall. It was quite the sight. And then there was a partial sanctuary that had been just chopped in half that was filled with junk. On the other side, but downstairs was all broken up into little cubbies, and the upstairs was this giant IT room. And I got so excited. I was like, oh my God, imagine this right here. All this space gets opened up. This whole thing gets opened up. This will be our sanctuary. We'll take out all these walls. We'll take out the ceiling up here. We'll make this high. We'll make this big giant space. We'll cut this off over there. We'll go over there. We'll cut all of these things down. This will be our fellowship hall. That upstairs will be our classes. It'll be fantastic. It'll be so different than what we have right now. And I remember people on the committee going, I can't imagine it. I can't imagine it. And I said to them, but I can. I can absolutely imagine the possibility here. Something so radically different. What was really great is that they trusted me in that, because I was so clear that I could imagine the possibilities. I could imagine, I couldn't see all the details, but I could feel into the spaces. I could sense the outline and the shapes of areas and how this would possibly all work. That was great, except that we had virtually no money. We had very little money in the bank. And another group of people were like, I don't know, I can't really imagine how we're going to do this. And I said, well, first of all, we're going to get the landlord to spend a whole lot of money on us because they really want us to take it over. This space has been vacant for 5 years. It's a kind of what's called a dogleg space. Nobody else is going to want it. I was so clear that I could imagine that they would be so happy to have people come and want to rent it that they would give us hundreds of thousands of dollars, which they did. And we saved $300,000 because I imagined that we could do this all with volunteers. We could do a whole boatload of the work ourselves. And we had people in our community that were like, yes, we can do this. And collectively, we imagined that we would do like an Amish barn raising, except that we would be in an office warehouse complex sort of thing, right? But do you see, we imagined the community coming together, and we talked about this Amish barn raising that we were going to do right here. We had 300 people donate 3,000 hours of volunteer labor, saved us $300,000. We had never done anything at that scale ever before. And it broke us open in a whole new way. I imagined that all of the hard work would actually be fun, that it would build community, and that it would be an entirely different experience than giving somebody, here's the money, make it happen for us, and do it all. What happened is because we imagined it as a barn raising and we imagined it as our space, that when we opened the doors, we already owned it. It was already ours. People walked around and said, I laid that tile, I painted that wall, I put up that door, I built that platform, I made those classrooms. We already owned it because we spent the time imagining Not just, now I want to be really clear. Some people are going to say, well, I can't imagine space, I don't even know where to put my couch. This isn't about imagining the space. That was what I brought to the table. Like, I really know how to do that. But other people brought to the table imagining that we could do the work, imagining this Amish barn raising, imagining that we could raise this money, that we could get the landlord to do all of this for us. Do you see? Everybody brought what they could imagine was possible, which were all things that we had not done before. Most importantly, what we imagined is that it would be worthwhile. We imagined how we would feel at the end. To reimagine isn't just imagining form. To reimagine is to imagine possibility, to imagine experience, feelings, qualities, flavors, expressions. It's not just about imagining an end result. I've never been one of those kind of people who could walk around and say, I'm going to imagine my perfect home, and I'm going to walk from one room to the next, and I'm going to see the stove and the dining room and the this and the that. I've never been able to be that clear. I don't imagine like a movie, but I can imagine the experience of a home that I love, or I can imagine work that feels worthwhile, where I'm making a contribution. Do you see? So I want to remind us that our imagination isn't always visual. It can be, but when I was a little kid and I had my little cowgirl outfit on and I had my little horse, and we clomped around downstairs in the basement playing, whatever games we were playing, I did not actually visualize my little stick horse as a real horse. I felt it. I felt that we were in this okay corral and we were doing whatever we were doing, playing whatever games we were playing. Do you see? And I think sometimes we get caught up in this idea that reimagining has to be something that we visualize. No, there's lots and lots and lots of ways that each of us experience things that we imagine. Think about our global vision, right? Our global vision, we use the words we envision. We envision a world that works for everyone. We envision all of these different things. And it implies that we can see it in our mind's eye, like we can visualize it. But seeing it in our mind's eye could mean that we can feel it in our hearts, or we can experience it in our bodies, or we can imagine snippets and possibilities and little pieces of it. Do you see? I really want to break open this idea of imagination, and I want to free us into the possibility that you actually already do this. You already do it, you know how to do it, you do it all the time, especially when you're catastrophizing or moving into anxiety. You don't necessarily see all the pictures, but you can generate a feeling within your body just like that. This is the same thing, only it's deciding, directing it at something on the other side of this disruption, or something now that it's been disrupted. Where do we want it to go? What do we want it to feel like? What do we want it to look like? And believe that this is the desire of Spirit moving as us to become a form, to express in my life, in your life, in the life of our home, our work, our engagement in the world, our social engagements, our spiritual activism, whatever it is, to imagine that we're actually being Spirit in the world, the hands and feet and eyes and voice and activity of Spirit in the world. Do you see? This then is us being part of the co-creative process. We're actually using the qualities and absolute truths about life. We're using them in service to bringing a form forward, to bringing an outcome forward, whether it's a form or not. This is exactly what we do in our spiritual mind treatment. In our spiritual mind treatment, in the third step of the spiritual mind treatment, we are describing in our imagination the outcome in its fullness. Sometimes we can see it. Sometimes we speak about how we feel it. Sometimes we declare that we own it. But we are using this process. We are imagining and then planting the form, the feeling, the expression into the universal law. Because we are making it real. Do you see? That's what imagination does. It makes it real. It's not wishing, hoping, daydreaming, fantasizing. That's not it. Imagining it makes it real. So Ernest Holmes says this. He works with this idea that everything, that involution is the predecessor to evolution, right? And involution is the idea that this thing that we have imagined becomes involved into matter and then evolves into the outpicturing. Right? In quantum physics, they call this collapsing the field. In the observer effect, it is the observation that they are postulating is what causes the infinite number of possibilities in the quantum field to collapse into the one that we actually experience. That collapsing of the quantum field is called the observer effect. Well, what we're doing in our imagination is we are observing the Play-Doh of the universe in the form, shape, experience, feeling that we expect it to manifest in. Do you see? Our imagination is the way we observe reality into being. And it is precisely what we do in our spiritual mind treatments. And this is what moves it from just wishful thinking and hoping and and having, well, maybe it'll happen, maybe it won't. Right? By imagining it, we make it real to ourselves. We begin to own it. And when we own it, embody it, that's what causes this collapsing of the quantum field. That is the act of creation. Now, the part of the two things I want to say. The part of the reimagining is, let's not waste our creative oomph on just constantly always improving or tweaking and thinking that's good enough, right? Because improving and tweaking just keeps us inside the status quo. And it's just incremental enough that we're never uncomfortable and we're never actually disrupted. But it's out of the disruption that something really spectacularly new is possible. Right, if we just look at the way in which we've been moving in the last 30 to 50 years around our environment, just tweaking it is not going to be enough. We need something spectacularly new, that we reimagine a resilient, sustainable lifestyle that works for everybody on the planet and for the planet itself. And we are being disrupted to that possibility, to that opening, to that awareness. It's not just tweak. It's actually reimagining something completely new. Now, the other thing about this, which is different than when we use our imagination to catastrophize or to get anxious, or like me, I use my imagination to have a conversation with someone that isn't even in the room. And I can have that conversation over and over and over again. And each time what I'm trying to do is I'm actually trying to imagine how they're going to change, how they're going to, all of a sudden see the light. Right? So reimagining isn't about changing another person. It is about owning that which we have begun to experience within our own consciousness. And it is about experiencing ourselves and life as different, not about imagining that someone else changes. Now, my experience is that other things around us must change, but not because I've imagined something and all of a sudden they're going to get it and they're going to be different. Okay, so it's not that kind of reimagining. So I want to close with what I've learned about this process. So the first thing, what I've learned about this process is reimagining is always about focusing on the what. And for me, it comes in flashes of images. So when I started looking for a condo, after I'd sold my home, and I was living with a friend of mine, and I was looking for a condo, I noticed that as I began to feel into, well, what am I looking for? I got little flashes. I saw some modern furniture, which I didn't own. I saw glass on a mantelpiece of a fireplace, like glass art, sculpture, or things that were made out of glass, and I saw trees out the window, like little flashes. Oh, and I kept seeing a roof line that looked like a house. And I was like, but I'm looking for a condo. I kept, like, do you see what I'm saying? It was just these little images, and the images produced feelings within me. Like, oh, this is going to feel like home and like a neighborhood, and it's going to feel artsy and a little modern, and yet I'm still going to have some sense of nature. Do you see? It wasn't the form per se. Those little flashes, it produced a feeling within me. And so then I realized after I bought the condo, this took me 1.5 years to find it. I bought the condo, I furnished it, I walked around it, I walked around the little driveway, and all of a sudden I went, oh my God, there's the roof line that I saw. And I walked into my condo, and I literally had put some glass art pieces on the mantle, and I was like, oh my God, there it is, right there. And it was like, this is modern and open, and there are, of course, I live in a tree house, there's trees right outside my window. Little flashes, not like a movie. Don't try to spend all of your time, I'm now going to walk around every little piece, because we can really shut ourselves down. The flashes of visual are really only about experiencing the qualities of life that we want to experience. Work with metaphors on the what. I do this a lot in spiritual mind treatment, but when I'm imagining, I often use metaphors of nature. So if I'm imagining that I see, let's say, CSLDallas really full of people, what I begin to do is imagine these beautiful azalea and rhododendron bushes that I had when I grew up in Philadelphia outside of our front. Actually, everybody had them outside of their front area, the front screened-in porches and all along the front. And what was so amazing was that all summer long they would be humming with bees, humming. And we would play in the front yard, and I loved that sound, and you could feel the activity. And so when I'm working on imagining activity and joyous activity and feeling work full and things, right, I'm using that metaphor of nature, and I'm feeling that feeling of the humming bees, and they're happy, and the flowers are blooming, and oh my God, they smell so good, and they're gorgeous, and do you see, we can imagine with metaphorically and build the feeling within us of this newness that we are imagining. And then, of course, we describe it into being. Now, the trick here, and Ernest Holmes says this, he says, don't talk about it to everybody else. Don't fritter away the energy by telling everybody. This work we're doing in our own consciousness, in our own minds, in our own hearts. Work within ourselves. This is about working with the self, the larger self, the self with a capital S, and working with that imagination and that experience of owning it. Don't fritter it away by talking about it to everybody else. Now, what we don't imagine, this is the other thing I've learned, is we don't imagine the how, which is what most of us spend most of our time trying to imagine. Can't imagine how this is going to work, right? There's the clue, right? There's the clue. What we have to do is really let it emerge and grow. Thomas Troward talks about the law of growth. Ernest Holmes talks about emergent evolution. That once we have planted this what in our consciousness, we need to now let it grow. We need to let it grow over time. It took me 1.5 years to find my condo. It took us 1 year to find this place and 5 6 months for us to rebuild it. I mean, all of these things take time. If they're worth doing, they take time. So we're not imagining the how it happens. What we're doing is using the co-creative process. We're using the power of our imagination, the power of the universal laws, the power of creation. We're deliberately and consciously using it. Our job is to stay the course, to keep working with our imagination, to keep letting it become more and more real. And when it takes time, to trust the process. Stay the course and trust the process. And then be surprised. Allow yourself to be surprised. I didn't know it was going to be that particular condo, and I actually didn't know how in alignment it was what I had imagined until after I bought it and furnished it and was walking around going, oh my God, here it is. Here it is. All these pieces that I had gotten flashes of, and it feels exactly like what I was looking for. Do you see? And so we can be surprised in the ways and the meanderings and the things that come up along the way because we are trusting the process, we are staying the course, because we know we are using a power that is for good in the universe. We're using that creative process, and our part of it is to imagine it, own it, be with it, live it, let it work us until it manifests. Reimagine. Don't just try to improve. Let it surprise you. So I'm going to close with this. These are some beautiful quotes that I've gathered together from Ernest Holmes. So I'm going to invite you, if you choose, you can close your eyes or just listen. Again, Brad's going to come up here and play some beautiful music. And I invite you to go within and let this rest in your heart. There is always more. The limitless resources of the Spirit are at our command. The power of the infinite is at our disposal. We have as much to use as we know how to take. But the taking is a thing of thought, of the will, and of the imagination. It is a thing of an inward feeling or interior awareness in that place where the mind has unified itself with a living spirit. Our word is creative, not because we will it or wish it, but because this is the nature of our being. Our impulse to create comes from the original creative spirit, which is in, around, and through us. The urge to live creatively comes from the urge of the divine imagination, which pushes itself out through us into self-expression. This is our nature. When we use our creative imagination in strong faith, it will create for us, out of the one substance, whatever we have formed in thought. In this way, we become a co-creator with life. New arts, new sciences, new philosophies, better government, and a higher civilization wait on our thought. The infinite energy of life and the possibility of our future evolution work through our imagination and will. The time is ready. The place is right where we are, and we are the people. And so it is.